The Point of View is brought to you by Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. Kel Charcoal, happy smile. Enterprise Life. Enterprise, your advantage. Bell Aqua Active. Bell Aqua Active. Stay true to originality.
Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television here on City TV. The Point of View gets the right guests, ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. We're live and interactive tonight. We're looking at the 2022 budget, possibly the budget that has taken the longest time to get full approval. On the 26th of November, the minority rejected the budget. On November 30, the majority approved the budget. But now the finance minister has come back to make some modifications. 5 key areas of modification have been announced. 4 of them have been clearly spelled out. 1, we're still not sure. Tonight, we speak to 2 key people in an important committee in Parliament to understand what these concessions mean and how far these would go to get the budget approved. I'll tell you more when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So tonight I'll be speaking to Deputy Minister of Finance John Kuma, who's also MP for Ejisu Drabin constituency. I'll also be joined by MP for Yape-Kusawu, John Jinapo, who's a key member of the Finance Committee of Parliament. So what did Ofori-Atta announce today? He held a press conference and pointed out some key things. He said he had written to the Speaker of Parliament to make some modifications to the budget. He says, on behalf of the President, he had written to the Right Honourable Speaker with details of modifications to the budget speech in response to emerging concerns by all stakeholders, including the minority. He says, number 1, with regards to the Japa royalties, he shall amend paragraph 442 and 443 to take out references to mineral royalties collateralization. It is important to note that any reference to a Japa was for informational purposes and as such was not reflected in the fiscal framework. So that's the first issue he seeks to change. Number 2, in respect to the unfortunate tidal waves which rendered about 3,000 people homeless in Keta, we shall make the necessary budgetary allocation of at least 10 million cedis to complete the feasibility and engineering studies for the coastal communities adversely affected. We will broaden the scope of the study to consider a more comprehensive solution to protect Ghana's 540 kilometers of coastline, including the 149 kilometers between Aflao and Pram Pram. Meanwhile, NADMO has responded to the humanitarian crisis created by the tidal waves on the Keta coastline. So the second issue was the Keta issue. The third issue relating to the Eka energy transaction, we shall amend paragraph 829 of the budget on the acquisition of a stake from Eka and AGM Petroleum by GMPC to reflect the resolution of Parliament dated 6 July that the terms and conditions of the loan for the acquisition of the sale of the shares shall be brought to Parliament for consideration pursuant to Article 181. And then number 4, on the benchmark value, we shall avert any hardship to importers and consumers while safeguarding their interest of local manufacturing industries to secure and expand jobs. It's a really long one. He also goes on to say it's important to note that this adjustment reflects only 11.4% of the total CIF value, of which 50% is for vehicles. Now, when it came to the issue of the E-levy, this is on point 8. So these are the 4 things that immediately will be amended. On the contentious matter of the E-levy, he says, having regards to its serious fiscal implications, we will continue our consultations with the minority caucus in Parliament and other stakeholders with a view to achieving consensus and reverting to the House in the shortest possible time. Let me give you a quick excerpt of what the minister said. Also in relation to questions about fuel price. Now, the minority hadn't really raised the fuel price issue up until now, but it's one of the key issues that journalists raised at the press briefing today.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are determined to enhance domestic revenue mobilization. The essence of our proposal on the E-levy is to widen the tax net and generate the required revenue to support entrepreneurship, youth employment, to build our infrastructure, especially roads, and reduce our debts. Permit me to emphasize that the E-levy represents our greatest opportunity to, in the medium term, broaden the tax base and meet the tax to GDP ratio of 20% as pertains among our peers. To lessen the impact of the E-levy on consumers and subscribers, especially the more vulnerable, we shall work with all stakeholders, including the techos, to ensure that we respond to the needs of the people. We shall also ensure that administrative measures will be taken to avoid attempts at evading the E-levy taxes. The proposed E-levy is largely progressive. We have intentionally set the Ghana CD 100 threshold, covering about 40% of Momo users, mindful of the need to exempt vulnerable groups while continuing to encourage the development of our nascent digital economy. This, to a very large extent, would ensure that a significant number of Ghanaians, low-income earners in the informal sector whose daily transactions fall below the 100 CD threshold are totally exempt from the payment of the E-levy. There are other issues that have been raised by the minority caucus and concerned citizens, such as increasing fuel prices, poor infrastructure, and insufficient job creation. We expect this budget to tackle all of these issues. The provision of the threshold demonstrates a caring government, the actions of a government that has since 2017 implemented some of the most innovative social intervention that this nation has ever seen. As you can see from the budget, various measures have been outlined. We'll continue to remain people-centered in our transformation agenda through the E-levy and other revenue financing sources. We will be establishing the unprecedented 10 billion U-Start program, our vehicle to remove the fundamental impediment to the growth of enterprises in Ghana, access to capital. We'll also address the provision of the requisite skills for our young people to confidently start, manage, and expand their own businesses while expanding the private sector to create more jobs. Significantly overhaul the digital infrastructure on which the transactions occur. This is to increase the assurance and protection as well as security within the cyberspace. We will aggressively expand the digitalization agenda to bring more convenience to Ghanaians, efforts to improve the delivery of health by digitizing records, supporting platforms for e-pharmacy.
So that was Minister of Finance, Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta. So joining me tonight is the Deputy Minister of Finance and MP for Ejisu constituency, Honorable Dr. John Kuma. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Bernard, good evening. Thank you.
I also have the MP for Yape Kusou, Honorable John Jinapo. Good evening.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us as well. So, Honorable John Kuma, I believe you were there with the minister during the presentation. Just give us some back-end information. So, how long did it take for the team to agree to make these 4 changes and to update us that there were discussions ongoing with the E-levy?
Yes. Good evening to viewers. You recall that on the, I think, 26th, on the Friday, when we concluded the debate in Parliament, the finance minister requested for time so that he could engage the leadership of the minority majority further and also see how best he could respond to some of the issues that they have raised. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So on a Tuesday, when finally Parliament approved the budget, he also announced that he will concede to some of the issues that they have raised. Of course, some of the issues required that he did further consultation with the president. He could not, on his feet on that day, give finality to some of the issues because the budget was presented for and on behalf of His Excellency the President. So I can tell you that upon the consultation with Excellency the President and all the various stakeholders, now the finance minister has officially written to inform Parliament on the various amendments and changes that he intended to make in response to the requests and demands that were made by the minority group on the 2022 budget.
So I noticed the Ejapa tidal wave, acre, and benchmark value issues were quickly addressed with changes. So these things weren't such big issues for your side at all, were they?
Well, not really, because if you look at Ejapa was mentioned for information purposes. Mm-hmm. The securitization of Ejapa royalty or incomes from the royalties from Ejapa has not been factored into the fiscal projections of the budget. So basically, it had zero impact on what we had projected to do. Of course, the unfortunate tidal wave incident has been responded to, and government wanted to respond by looking at the entire 540-kilometer coastal lines, towns and cities that have potential or to be affected by the dangers of this tidal wave. So, of course, committing at least 10 million cities to do feasibility studies and also to be able to commence the second phase of the Keta Sea Defense Project is something that we can easily absorb. And then the Aka Energy, it is a question of language, because they wanted us to state the expression to reflect that what Parliament initially had an agreement on, that the financial agreement will be resubmitted to Parliament for further considerations and approval. So all those things have been done on the benchmark values as well, So these were matters that we could easily respond to without disturbing the fiscal framework that we have already presented to Parliament. And on the... Okay, so I believe you come to...
Yes, I'll come to E-levy later. So let me come to Honorable John Jinapo. I noticed the minister mentioned the minority in the speech he read, which suggests that he was directly responding to the concerns your side raised. How satisfying is that for you? And how unprecedented is it to have a Minister of Finance make any concession at all to a budget after having read it and having had it approved by, admittedly, one side of the House?
Thank you very much. My regards to my brother, John. First of all, the budget is more or less a quantitative expression of what the minister or government wants to do. And that's where we talk about the fiscals. And the fiscal is generally how government raises revenue, mostly through tax revenue, and then how it intends spending those revenues. That's the expenditure side, so where the revenues go into. And so when we met them, we were clear with the issues. One was Ejapa, which is not any big issue, because like we've all agreed, Ejapa doesn't affect the tables. It doesn't come with any figure. All we wanted is that the construction, the wording, ought to reflect our position. And so, like you rightly said, that is not any major issue. If you take Ake it shouldn't even generate any controversy, because there's a parliamentary resolution. And so when you are presenting a budget, that budget should reflect the resolution that was adopted in Parliament. And so I don't think that has been a big issue. All we're saying is that, look, let the budget statement, and like Dr. John rightly said, is for information purposes. ACE doesn't affect the fiscal tables in any way. And the budget, the core issue with the budget has to do with the fiscal tables. And so all we said is that let ACE reflect the resolution in Parliament. 3 has to do with Keta. We were talking of the construction, not a 10 million for feasibility study. There's been a lot of work that has been done already there. There's been some construction. We thought that the right thing is to extend the construction. And so that 10 million clearly is a drop in the ocean. Then the issue of the benchmark, it wasn't a major issue. All we thought is that let's ensure that it does not lead to inflation. Now there's a so-called response, but we don't get the details. I'm sure that the details of this issue of benchmark would be dealt with at the committee level. This is just a statement, and I've seen the list of some of these benchmark items. A lot of vehicles, most of which are not produced here in Ghana. Those trucks are not produced in Ghana, and so you cannot say that you are putting that increment on trucks when you don't produce them here in Ghana. I sit on the finance committee and I know the assembling plants and what they are able to do. Trucks are not part of it. Key thing that is missing has to do with fees and charges. We stated clearly that fees and charges, we cannot grant the minister a blanket approval of a minimum average of 15% and then index it to inflation for the next 5 years. If you want to index all these things to inflation, then you must as well index salaries to inflation. Taxi drivers might also want their charges and all that indexed to inflation. And we made it clear at the meeting when we're negotiating that if government is taking the lead to index its expected revenues from fees and charges to inflation, then you might as well be indexing all the others to inflation so that there's parity. But the big elephant in the room is the E-levy. That is what led down to the breakdown of the negotiation. And my good friend John was at the negotiation at the tail end. And if he recalls, what stalled the negotiation and what led down to a breakdown of the negotiation was E-levy. That was a cardinal issue. So if the minister chooses not to address the issue that led down to a breakdown of the negotiation, that puts us in a very, very difficult situation. It puts us in a very, very tight corner. Because let's admit, the whole controversy, both within Parliament and outside Parliament, has been the key issue of E-levy. And if you go to the fiscal tables, and I refer you to just a moment, just one moment, please. I'm trying to open the document. I think Appendix 4 or so. If you look at the tax revenue that government expects, the total tax revenue is about 80 billion. Out of this 80 billion, apart from VAT, which gives an amount of 14 billion, the next biggest item in terms of the revenues from the tax flows has to do with the e-transaction levy, almost 7 billion. So that is the main issue. It's a big item that I think that government ought to engage. Government ought to listen to us and see how, if they really want us to build consensus, demonstrate and show good way so we can look at that issue. Without that, it puts all of us in a very, very tight corner.
So if the E-levy issue is not resolved, you don't see your side agreeing to approve the appropriation items?
When we had the negotiation, leadership was quite clear, and my good friend will confirm that the minority leader and Honorable Montaka, the chief, made it clear that either we have a deal in its entirety or no deal. That was the ground rule preceding the meeting. Prior to the meeting, it was clear that, look, we all agree or there's no deal. And at the time we left the meeting, we had not concluded or come to an agreement on the negotiation. It is true that during negotiation, a lot of things take place. Sometimes, like our General Secretary said, if you are not ready to shift, then you don't even go for negotiations. And at the negotiation, our side demonstrated and showed good will. But it does appear that on the issue of the E-levy, government hasn't made any shift. And government still maintains that 1.75, which we describe as draconian, which we describe as harsh, and that it will affect a lot of people.
All right. Honorable Deputy Minister, what is the position on the E-levy? The minister's statement was very scanty. At least point number 8 just said that they will continue consultation with the minority caucus and other relevant stakeholders with a view to achieving consensus and reverting to the House in the shortest possible time. That was very open. Can you give us more insight into what is being discussed? Is it the percentage that's being discussed or the very idea? Honorable John Kuma.
Yes, thank you very much. The issue of E-levy we addressed. We know how thorny the issue is. And John rightly put it that after VAT, the next biggest item in our fiscal framework is the E-levy. So asking government to drop it means that you are going to create a gaping hole in the fiscal space, and that will affect a lot of things. So we all have to engage very conscious of the fact that this has huge consequences on our fiscal space. So I had a little problem with the position that my friends took during the negotiations. And Happy John has put it rightly here, that we either get all the 6 we are putting forward or we get nothing. I mean, if you approach a negotiation with such a stance, then obviously you are not really prepared to compromise on anything to ensure that you give and take. And I think that going forward, I will still plead with John and our friends in the minority that at the end of the day, it's a nation we are all seeking to build. All these things, we should work in good faith. And if you're a minority group, yes, it's good to put the government on its toes, but to force government to swallow your position, whether it augurs well for the fiscals or not, is something that can be draconian. So let us not come with fixed positions that we are getting all our 6 or we are getting nothing. And for me, we should review that posture if we want to make any headway as far as this consensus building, which the nation enjoins us to do, is concerned. E-levy will be addressed, obviously. And today, I believe the finance minister didn't make any emphatic announcement on rates because as we speak, there is still consultations going on both in Parliament and outside Parliament. And last week, another committee of Parliament made up of about 20 were put in place to further engage on this E-levy matter. So Minister believes that still there is room for further engagement. Some are proposing 0%, some are proposing 1%, some are proposing 1.5%, some are also proposing 2%. And my friend Kofi Bento actually proposed 5%. So it is not everybody who wants below 1.75%. But at the end of the day, the collective interest of the state and how this borders on our fiscal space and where we can find alternatives, these discussions are so critical in coming with a finality and conclusions on this E-levy. But rest assured, before the bill is finally passed, we believe that we'll have a good consensus with our friends in Parliament and outside Parliament so that we can all have one position on this E-levy. Our government is not in a hurry to ignore any commentary or suggestion on this E-levy. We want to carry as much suggestions as possible on board. And that is why today the finance minister held on to the final determinations on the E-levy. But rest assured, before the passed, we're going to have the agreement and announce it.
This is the point of view. We're talking to Honorable John Kuma, Deputy Minister of Finance, MP for Ejiso, and Honorable John Jinapo, MP for Yapeku. So we're trying to understand what the concessions the Minister of Finance announced earlier today mean for the budget approval itself. We understand appropriation takes place. We also know that Parliament has to rise before Christmas. Will they have enough time to do this? We'll also discuss what the minorities' positions are. According to Honorable John Kuma, look, you brought 5 or 6 things. We're giving you 4. We are dealing with the 5th one. Aren't you prepared to move? So we'll try and understand from the minority to what extent they want to bend. And then earlier on as well, there was a whole strike over fuel prices. Somehow, both sides have been silent on this. Is this a gentleman's agreement not to politicize fuel prices, or is this the calm before the storm? This is the point of view. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. The point of view tonight is analyzing Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta's concessions as the budget approval process continues. 26th November, the minority rejected the budget. 30th, the majority approved it. Now we are getting into the final details. The minister amended portions or proposed to Parliament to make changes to the JAPA component. They supplied some money for the tidal wave issue. The acre matter was resolved. The benchmark value has also been dealt with. 2 issues the minority is not happy with. They say the fees and charges. They cannot give government a blanket agreement of 15% increase on all those fees and charges, they need some specifics. And the big elephant in the room is the E-levy. I have Honorable John Jinapor, MP for Yape Kusau, and Honorable John Kuma, Deputy Minister of Finance, MP for the Ejisu constituency. Let me come to Honorable Jinapor. So, can we get clarity on your position on the E-levy? I read a story that the minority leader had said your side was prepared to work with 1% E-levy. This was at a program a couple of days ago. Is this the position, or was he speaking his personal view? Honorable Jinapor.
First of all, let me quickly clarify this issue. It's too simplistic to just say that we've given 4 and it's left with only 1. In the field of finance, that's why you do what you call weighted averages. If you just change the sentence of ACE to say that we shall pursue the ACE energy deal in accordance with what Parliament approved, I don't see that concession. We're just asking you to do what is proper. And so if you use that alone and say that, because I agree with you that the budget statement did not reflect what the House approved, and so I'll correct it, and then move on that to say that, look, I've granted a concession, and so you must also agree on the other leg. That's why I say it's too simplistic. I don't see that as a concession at all. The issue of Ajapa, like Deputy Minister of Finance said, these are things that does not affect the fiscal tables. And the whole crust of this matter has to do with the issues that affect the fiscal tables, i.e. the revenues you are raising and the expenditure side. So that's why we say that the fees and charges affects the fiscal tables because of the capping and realignment. And also, it affects you, the ordinary Ghanaian. Because we're talking of DVLA, we're talking of Forestry Commission, Minerals Commission, NPA, Petroleum Commission, all these standards authority, all of them increasing their fees and charges. And the issue of taxation is the incidence of tax and the impact. So that ought to be cleared. Then the issue of E-levy, the minority leader speaks for the minority side. And we stand by him firmly and supports what he said. What he said reflects the position of the minority side in totality, not his personal view. Like we all said, when you go for negotiations, our position has been that suspend the E-levy. Government's position is that it wants to tax 1.75. When we meet at negotiations, a lot goes on. And my friend would agree that a lot goes on during negotiations, including shifting of positions and trying to find a middle ground. That is where this issue of 1% came to light. That look, even if you can't do anything, what does a 1% represent? What are the figures? And the ministry said they needed to go back to do some calibrations here and there in order to determine the impact of that. That was inconclusive. We did not conclude on any figure. And the minister is on the program. Okay, so from their 1.7, what is their point? Are they still maintaining 1.7? Are they coming down? And that's why we were clear that at the meeting, we ought to come to a finality on all the issues, or there's no deal. It doesn't mean that you must automatically yield to whatever the minority is saying. But our point is that we must conclude, and all of us agree that this is the way forward. We don't want things in parts and in bits. And I think that the position is quite clear, that our position has been that suspend the E-levy. But usually when you go for negotiations, a lot can happen. And like I said, we did not agree on the issue of E-levy. We did not come to a middle ground. We did not come to a common ground. We did not come to a consensus. And so we are back to where we were.
I see. But on the E-levy issue, if you listen to people like Bryce Simmons, they've written and said that E-levy will elicit behaviors that can harm digitalization, and that it is not just a quick tax measure, but it can have lasting impact and needs more analysis. So that suggests that some people in civil society think that it's a non-starter completely. You have said that even though you say it should be suspended, you are prepared as a minority to deal with 1%. So that's quite a shift Is it not? Because once you agree in principle that the E-levy should, once you are suggesting 1%, it means you agree in principle that the E-levy should exist, which is different from saying that this will harm digitalization. We haven't thought through this thing yet, so let's put it aside.
But let me try and be very clear on this. Our position is that suspend the E-levy, just like Bright Simon and co are saying, and that we need to do further work and further consultation on this whole E-levy thing. So we are clear as far as our position is concerned that we are against the E-levy in its totality. But I'm saying that during negotiations, a lot of figures came up, like John is saying. And then there was a question that, assuming you were to do 1%, what would be the impact? How does it translate? How does it affect the ordinary Ghanaian? Just like Bright Simmons and Co are saying that, let's hold back and do the analysis. So it would have been based on the analysis that would then even determine whether we ought to be agreeing or not. And I thought that I should just clear this.
Okay.
But the minority's position is simple, that the E-levy in its current form and shape should be suspended for further consultation.
I see. And your proposal would not just be 1%, but also the minimum cap should rise from 100 to 300. Is that correct?
All those were issues that we said we should do some calculation. And there was a task for myself and Atufos on our side to also do some analysis, assuming you were to raise the threshold from 100 to 300, assuming you were to do like a 1%, what would be the impact? How do you go about it? And it would require some work. That's why our position is that don't implement E-levy. Let us do more work on it. Let's do more consultation because of its unintended consequences. So if you were to ask me, our position and that of my good friend Bright Simon and co, it is about the same. It's just that maybe you want to take this approach and do the analysis before. But the key issue is that what is government's position? Because a lot of people have spoken. What is government saying about E-levy? I think that also ought to be clear. Is government still maintaining that it won't shift from the 1.75? Is government still saying that it won't suspend it? So that we also know what government is thinking. But if you read that statement, it's quite clear that a lot of English was written, but then the issue of E-levy has been parried.
Honorable John Kuma, so at least the minority have moved from suspend it completely to we are prepared to entertain 1%. And they're also saying move the threshold from 100 cedis to 300. But Minister today didn't move. He just said discussions are ongoing. Why didn't he move?
Yes, well, it's quite interesting. It's just a confirmation that we have all not concluded on this E-levy matter. And like I told you, we want to do as much consultation as possible in dealing with this E-levy matter. I'm happy that our friends have moved from 0 to 1. And it shows that...
Well, not.
Well,
please, don't misquote me.
Okay, John, let me not put you in trouble, but at least gradually as we continue to engage, we will get to understand. But John was asking the fiscal impact on assuming we are supposed to come to 1%. For me, the projection is to receive about 6.9 billion. So if you say you want to, at the 1.75%, if you want to do 1%, then it means that you are reducing that to about 4 billion. So it means government now has to look for the 2.9 billion from other sources. And I don't know what the suggestion of my friend John and his group will be. Where do we raise the 2.9 billion from, or where do we cut the expenditure? So all these things have implications. Now, John says that, we gave them 6, but the answers to the 6 are not the same because one affects the fiscal framework. And he's interested in the ones affecting the fiscal framework. I thought John would be interested in protecting the fiscal framework so that at least we can deal with the other policy issues. And because the impact of touching the fiscal framework is also to disrupt the government business and also affect expenditure patterns of government. I mean, it has all these things have implications. For instance, why do we need E-levy? And government has given 3 strong reasons why at this particular time we should be able to introduce E-levy. First of all, it's on the youth start. We have about 11 million of our young people who are looking for jobs at different levels, and government is seeking to build a sustainable entrepreneurial nation with focus on job creation. That means that we have to be able to provide a sustainable patient capital or patient financing arrangement for young people to be able to create jobs. The government has allocated about 10 billion cedis in the medium term, the next 3 years, for this Youth Start program to come on, so that young people can find capital to start businesses in this country. That is very key to the future of this country. We are talking about roads, aggressive construction of roads. And if you look at the road toll levy which we scrapped, in the whole year it was giving government about 7 to 8 million. And if you have 7 to 8 million, one contractor is raising certificate almost $1 billion. How do you pay them? But this E-levy will make it possible for government to be able to pay contractors on time, roll out more road constructions in our communities. If you check, almost every community in this country require improvement on our roads. How do we address those infrastructure concerns? That is the E-levy. It will help us to address those concerns. Another important issue is the question of debt sustainability and fiscal consolidation. Many people have raised concerns. We are now at 77.5% of our GDP in terms of our debt levels. And how long will we continue to avoid, introducing the right taxes, improving our tax rate from the 12.5% that we know to at least the sub-regional average, become competitive also in our region. So all these things will help us to now begin to reduce our debt burden, the levels of borrowing, begin to create a better future for young people, and then also improve on our road infrastructure in the country. And many people, especially those making argument for 2% and 5%, have said that if only government can convince us that we are collecting these levies for these purposes, and government can show that indeed we are going to apply these funds to these specific purposes that we have outlined, they don't have any difficulty in sharing the burden and making sure that we all develop this country together. So yes, we understand the economic difficulties in the current world of global inflation and difficulties that we all have to manage. And it's not with excitement that government will introduce any taxes. But these are very relevant steps that we need to take in order to anchor.
So will there be movement on the E-levy from government side?
I can assure you that before the bill is passed, government will come out with a firm announcement on its decision on E-levy. And like John said, we are still talking, we are still engaging. If both sides have not concluded, there's even now a 20-member committee. We haven't heard anything from their work. The consultations is not only in Parliament, it's also with the telcos, it's also with the EMIs, the electronic money issuers, who are in the space of MOMO and all that. So we have to come to conclusion with all these stakeholders. And very soon, a firm announcement will be made on what is the final rate that government is prepared to go.
A quick clarification, then I beg you. First of all, the 20-member committee, John, kindly check their reference. It's just to ensure that there is orderliness in the House, and that the chaos that we witness is brought to. So they don't have a mandate to negotiate E-levy. The team that met you, led by the minority leader, has a mandate. Two is that, let me just make it clear that the minority's position is that the E-levy should be suspended. A lot happens at negotiations, but I'm saying that the minority's position is that the E-levy should be suspended. And so we would see how it goes going forward. But we still have a lot to do because the bill hasn't even been introduced yet. So we don't even know the details of the bill. This is just the policy underpinning the whole issue of E-levy. John talks about contractors, you need revenue. Yes, but if you need revenue, Bernard, do you just start with a 1.75, knowing the consequence and the ordinary Ghanaian? Because I've just looked at even your NAPCO figures, 100,000 people alone, the allowances alone runs to 960. Meanwhile, of this 7 billion, you are allocating only 1 billion for the youth tax. If the main issue the minister says is unemployment, he says unemployment is the number one issue. That is where all of us ought to be looking at. Because of that, you are taxing E-levy, because that's the principal one amongst others. And out of that 7 billion, only 1 billion is allocated for that purpose. For me, it creates a major problem. But my point is that you cannot say that just because you need to raise revenue, just because you need to pay contractors, you should come out with such punitive taxes. I think that is clearly aggressive.
Thank you. We'll take a short break. When we come back, there are some questions for the panel, and then we'll end with the issue of fuel prices, which somehow the budget didn't really talk about. This is the point of view. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Point of View. Tonight we're trying to understand the extent to which Finance Minister's concessions for the budget would influence the minority in approving the appropriations. My guest, John Kuma, Deputy Minister of Finance, MP for Ejiso, John Jinapor, MP for Yapeku. So let me read two quick comments coming in. This is from Franklin Kujo. It says, I've read the Finance Minister's statement on the 2022 budget. The part on Ijapa and Eka deals are a good first step to dealing with the vexed issues. We will watch the space. I had hoped there would be an emphatic statement on the E-levy beyond consultation with the minority and a clarification on agency fees for collecting same. Admittedly, we are in the hardest of times with a debt overhang, so perilous that girding our collective loins seems inescapable. The minority should continue discussions with government, but charity begins with the government. At least, reduce the budget to the Office of Government Machinery by 25%. It can help build a few school blocks. Carpe diem, Franklin Kujo. Then this one is coming in from a listener who says, or a viewer, Bernard, find out from the Deputy Minister how government will curb frivolous spending so that money will be available for essential items only. The craze for VAT is obscene and needs to stop. All right. Let me end with the fuel prices. So, and I'm coming straight to John Kuma on this. A journalist asked Finance Minister today, I don't think I have time to play the whole question, about the absence of any comment on the tax build-up in the fuel prices. I'm not too sure if I understood the minister's response. So let me just play the question the journalist asked, and then I'll take your answer. So this is the question the journalist asked about the fuel price build-up, if we have it.
Later this afternoon. So I guess I'll be briefed on that, on exactly, what the impact is and what it means, and the conversations about world fuel prices and what the build-up, etc., to see what we can do. Yeah. But I think for the narrative and the conversation, we are not, as a country, an island.
Sorry about that. So I was hoping to get the question. We got the answer right. So Honorable Kuma, what was your understanding of the concern? My feeling is that we were hoping that as part of all the announcements the minister would make, today being a day where trotto drivers had gone on strike over fuel price increases in the tax build-up, would have had something substantive from government on this, but we haven't.
Yeah, Bernard, just 2 quick points on the E-levy, then I'll deal with the fuel matter. The issue of the 1.7% being draconian, as John is putting it, I want to say emphatically that we did a lot of work before we came to decisions on E-levy. And Government Commissioner Research talked to about 10,000 Ghanaians before finally deciding to introduce E-levy, because we think that the digital space have grown to a level where it is matured enough to take the 1.75%. And then we also did a threshold of 100 cedis because we believe, or per the research, about 40% of Ghanaians do not send more than 100 Ghana cedis a day. And we thought they were the more sensitive and vulnerable group that we needed to exempt. So we did not just introduce E-levy without considering the Ghanaian and the impact of the E-levy on him. So that's just one. And then two, on the question of the position of the minority, I want to take this opportunity to plead with John and the minority group again that democracies all over the world, minorities have your say, but government have their way. I think we've had enough say. Let's look at how we allow government to also go ahead with this budget implementation so that together we can build this country. It shouldn't be a fixed position of either I get this or nothing happens. When we do that, we'll be weakening our own democracy and painting a different picture out there about reasons why we are even in parliament. So please, there's an appeal to you. Now, on the question of the fuel, yes, the question came. Of course, today was very unfortunate to see drivers laying down their keys and refusing to go to work over issues of fuel. And of course, the background to this challenge, as we all know, is more of global impact than local issues. We know that the current fuel prices on the global market has hit as high as $90 to a point that, we know the position of the OPEC members and to the point that the U.S. have started releasing their reserves to see if they can push down the prices. So it's a global phenomenon that Ghana has been caught along in terms of high fuel prices. But the assurance that the minister was giving in his answers was that there was going to be a meeting later in the day, which has already taken place between the transport owners and leaders and government side, so that we can amicably resolve these impacts. And I think that that has been done. And there has been an announcement that from tomorrow, commercial drivers are going back to work. And the assurance is that as the world market prices begin to fall, and like I said, it's now beginning to fall because U.S. has started releasing part of their reserves to bring down the prices. We are all hoping that we are going to see some drastic reductions, which will also impact on the local pump prices.
All right. Let me take Honorable Jinapo's comments on this. You didn't say much about the fuel price relating to the budget, although you've made statements about this before. Any reason why it wasn't in your budget commentary?
I think we've been clear on that. And if you listen to my debate, I dwelt a lot on fuel. Firstly, to compare U.S. to Ghana, in my opinion, is most unfortunate. The United States is a net importer of oil, and the data is available. I just open to the data. Ghana is a net exporter of oil. In fact, if you read the budget, our oil prices was benchmarked at 50 something. It's risen by 60%. Cocoa price has risen by 3.8%. The volumes has risen by 32%. Gold price has risen by 4.4%. And so our value from exports alone is about 11 billion cedis so far. So I just can't understand why you are a net exporter of crude oil. And when the prices go up, instead of you using the windfall from the monies that you get from the export, you turn around and just say that because the prices are up, Ghanaians should suffer. Already, even as I speak to you, the UPPF has increased by 164%, price stabilization by 40%, boss margin by 200%, fuel market by 164%. In October, government announced that it was coming to Parliament to get Parliament to suspend the price stabilization recovery levy. Bernard, if you remember, we are in December, we are just about rising. Government has not done that. There was a full statement issued which said that based on a directive from the president, they were coming to Parliament. As we speak, they haven't even done that. So that is the problem.
We will deal with that on a subsequent program, but I want to thank you, Honorable John Jinapo. He is the MP for Yape Kusau, a former Deputy Minister in that energy sector. Honorable John Kuma is Deputy Minister for Finance, MP for Ejisu. Gentlemen, thank you for being on the show. Viewers, we hope you've learned something. Coming up next is the Business Dashboard. Stay with City TV. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
The Point of View is brought to you by Kel Charcoal Toothpaste. Kel Charcoal, happy smile. Enterprise Life. Enterprise, your advantage. Bell Aqua Active. Bell Aqua Active. Stay true to originality.